Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve and the interest rate hike that they introduced yesterday. So this would normally be a really big deal that you would hear about more in the news, but right now you're not hearing it as much because the whole Kavanaugh hearing has pretty much overshadowed everything right now in the media. But it's a big deal that the Federal Reserve moved the interest rate. So the federal funds rate right now is at a range of 2 to 2.25. Okay, they do this in ranges instead of solid figures because then it allows them to float in between as they see fit. So that's why the range exists. So why does this matter? Why does it matter that they have increased the interest rate? Normally, this is a really big deal, and it has big implications. And the reason it has big implications is because you are talking about the core fundamental rate that controls all other interest rates in the U.S. economy. Okay, the federal funds rate is the foundation for all other interest rates, and not just in the U.S. economy, but this affects on a global scale. So let me explain why. So the federal funds rate is the overnight rate in which lending institutions or financial institutions are allowed to borrow from each other, okay? And we won't get into the logistics of that. Just know that that's how they borrow from each other, and this is the interest rate the Federal Reserve has set for those loans, overnight loans. So this affects how the financial institutions then decide to rate their loans, their CD rates, all of that. So car loans, mortgages, and this also, the federal funds rate also affects the prime rate, which then affects every other borrowing cost in the known economy. So this is a big deal. And this also affects the interest rate for US Treasuries, corporate bonds. I mean, if this goes up, everything that has an interest rate goes up. If this goes down, everything with an interest rate also goes down. So it has big implications. Whether it goes up or down, it's going to have a huge impact on the economy. Not only does it do that, but also then changes the value of currency. So in any given central bank, whether it's here in the US with the Federal Reserve or the ECB, which is the European Central Bank, or the Bank of England for the UK, these central banks use this as a way to either devalue their currency or to increase the value of their currency. And far as how currency valuation rules work, we'll talk about that in a whole different time, but just know that it affects the currency. So if the interest rates rise, it makes the currency stronger. If the interest rates are dropped, then it makes the currency weaker. So right now, we've been steadily increasing, the Federal Reserve has been steadily increasing since right before Janet Yellen left at the beginning of 2017. So it's been good. She had been very slow to move it. Powell is moving this a lot faster. Now, this is a really big concern for a lot of analysts because they feel that he's being a little bit aggressive. But it has its pros and cons. So if the economy starts heating up too fast, so if the growth of the U.S. economy goes too fast, then the Federal Reserve has to increase the rate, the federal funds rate, to keep in line with that. And some might ask, well, why would you want to taper the growth of the economy? Like, isn't that the point, is to grow GDP, make the economy stronger? That's what makes it more rich. Yes, it does all those things. But what also happens is if you have too much growth too fast, you also have really high inflation. So that's where the Federal Reserve, they don't like high inflation. They like to keep that tapered down. And And so their target goal is 2% inflation. So if it's going higher than that at a very quick pace, then they're going to move the interest rate accordingly so that it keeps that in check. So then people will ask, okay, well, then what's the problem? If they're doing their job and raising the rates, why is this even a concern that they're raising rates? The concern comes in that if you move the interest rate too fast ahead of the economy, then you have a possibility that you could cause it to go into recession. So the Federal Reserve obviously is very cognizant of this, and so they're watching it carefully, but so are analysts, and they feel that Powell's moving it pretty aggressively. A lot of analysts had thought about 3 interest rate movements this year, 2 to 3, and they're pacing at 4. They are looking to do another one in December. So if that happens, again, it's a good sign. That means the U.S. economy is growing fast enough to take this hit. But at the same time, they have to be careful if that the federal funds rate goes ahead of growth, where it ends up getting raised faster than the rate of growth that the U.S. economy is clipping at, then that's where it could push into contraction, and so or recession. So that's the big concern. So every time they do, have a meeting, we will be discussing it. So right now, bonds are taking a big hit because bonds work on a teeter-totter effect. So if prices are down, then interest rates are up, and vice versa. If interest rates are down, then if interest rates are up, then prices are down. Right now, it was this way where the interest rate was down and the prices were up, and now it's starting to go this way where the interest rates are going up and the prices are getting pushed down. So, so bonds right now are taking a big hit, or what's called fixed income. So those are taking big hits in the market, but it was to be anticipated. Some investments, some of the bond investments had already anticipated this move, so they adjusted accordingly. Some of them didn't, and so they're getting hit now. So if you see your investment accounts fluctuating in the fixed income section, this is why. But yeah, so it's a pretty big deal when they're moving the interest rates. But as the economy gets bigger, the reliance on that $4.5 trillion that we had discussed last time, it will become less and less, and the Federal Reserve moves will be kind of going back into the background, which is where it was prior to really 9/11. And then after 9/11, the Federal Reserve took some big steps to make sure the economy didn't go really far into recession after the terrorist attacks. And so they moved the interest rates downward at that point. So, and that was big news. But then they were raising it up, and the markets were doing well, and the economy was booming, so nobody even paid attention. And then the financial crisis hit. But that's when the Federal Reserve took unprecedented measures, and that's why they have come to the forefront so much. But now they're kind of going back into the background, which again is a good sign. That means people are feeling confident. They're not watching the reserve as closely, and so that's how it's all moving right now. I hope that made sense. If you guys have questions further about how it works or how the Federal Reserve functions, let me know. But this is one of the levers that they have to use, which is interest rates. And it's one that's used pretty commonly, not just in the US, but across the globe. So, and it's a big deal because right now, after the financial crisis, a lot of the central banks around the world have taken their cues from the US. So whatever we've done, they've kind of followed suit. So the fact that we're raising our interest rates, most likely we're going to see other central banks around the world also starting to raise interest rates. So, under the assumption that their economy is strong enough to take the interest rate increase. So anyways, I hope that helped. We'll be talking about some other topics later. But yeah, unfortunately all of this, what I consider fun stuff, has been overshadowed by the whole Kavanaugh hearing, which has been on the forefront of the political arena, especially right now as we're going into election season. So midterm elections. So if you haven't registered to vote, go register to vote, and I will talk with you later.